Welcome to our first video session of JUMPSTART today, our first volume installment of this particular process that we've decided to take up. This is somewhat of an experiment. We are glad to have you join us. We're very happy to have a panel with us of folks who have been invited to read a book and to get together and in a relaxed fashion, not in an overly structured manner, but in a relaxed way from the comfort of their own homes or wherever they happen to be, where they're comfortable, chat a little bit about what the book might have meant to us and what we think we're seeing. The book that we're going to be talking about is called Comeback Stories, and the line there says, "A Prisoner No More." This is a book that was put together through the auspices of JUMPSTART Ministries, Grace Church, and the South Carolina Baptist Convention, and was most recently distributed to all incarcerated inmates, both adults and those in the juvenile justice system in the state of South Carolina. That would be about 19,000 people who in the past week or so have received a copy of this book. The folks on our call, our panel, I'm not going to go and introduce everybody. Just like to say that we have kind of an interesting cross section here. All of these folks are friends, family, and folks that are known to me, and it's a pleasure to have such a good cross section. We have folks here who are baby boomers. We have Gen Xers. We have folks who are pre-baby boomers. We have folks who would classify themselves perhaps as Republicans or Democrats. We have folks here who would be from different types of backgrounds, folks who've been entrepreneurs, folks who've worked in corporate world settings. We have a good cross section. And if you think about it, even in terms of faith, because obviously JUMPSTART Ministries is a faith-based ministry, we have folks here who are of the Catholic faith. We have Protestants with us, and we have folks who have been on long journeys in faith and folks who have been on relatively shorter journeys. So with that, I do have some questions, and I'm just going to put these out to our panel and invite our folks to respond, and we'll look forward to talking about it and seeing what we think about this book. So before reading the book, what were your general thoughts about persons convicted of crimes and incarcerated in our prison system?
I'd given a lot of thought to that, but generally I just felt that anybody in prison got there because of bad choices and they deserved to be there. My mind has changed a little bit after reading the book, but that's sort of the general attitude I had. And sometimes that's reinforced. I don't know how many of you saw the article in the Spartanburg Herald yesterday, talking about prisoners and the gangs and the drug operations run out of prisons. And, you know, it's just sort of a scary thing. So I did not have a good impression of people who were in prison.
There may have been a time where I would have been, I guess, somewhat judgmental. Even though I think if we're all honest, we've all done things that we've deserved to be put into prison for. But I mean, for me, I actually was arrested as a teenager and deserved to be put in prison, but was not. But I don't know, 20 years ago, Chuck Colson, who you may recall was arrested with Watergate, called us. When he was in prison from Watergate, he became a Christian. And I mean, it was an incredible life-changing experience for Chuck Colson. To this day, there's still Project Angel Tree and prison fellowship ministry that goes on because of Chuck Colson, even though he's passed. But he called us and asked us about a prison in Louisiana called Angola Prison. At one time was the bloodiest prison in America. Many years ago, inmates would cut their Achilles tendon just to get out of the general population. It was a terrible place to be. Over 5,000 inmates, one of maybe the world's largest prison. It had over 5,000 inmates on 17,000 acres. So anyway, he said this was the only radio station he knew that had a license for a radio station, and invited us to come down because the station had old equipment, it was dilapidated, and it was off the air, and asked if we could help. So that became my project, and went to Angola, Louisiana, which is 20 miles off the main road and away from everything, surrounded on three sides by the Mississippi River. Just an amazing place. I got to meet the warden, Burl Kane, and we looked at it first, came back, went there 5 times. The second time did a fundraiser back to our radio stations. And the goal was to raise $80,000. We raised $120,000 and built the radio station there on the campus. But in that time, I got to know a lot of the inmates so well that we're shaving wiring, to put wiring in speakers. And I actually handed one a pretty big knife. And and I got to thinking that's probably not the thing to do, but you get to know these guys and you realize. And so I got to the place where I could ask them, why are you here? And I had some tell me some incredible stories. One guy in particular talking about a mistake he made on the way home from work. Every day he would stop and get a beer, and he did one day, and some guy that had gotten drunk was mouthy and hit him and pushed him, and he hit the guy, and the guy hit his head on the bar, the little brass rail at the bottom, and he died, and he got 20 years. And he cried as he was telling me the story and said, my kids have grown up without me. They've gotten their license without me. They graduated without me. They got married without me. They've had grandkids without me. And the guy wept as he was telling me this. His name was Carrie. I'll never forget. And he, getting to know these guys as I did, just changed. So my attitude was already changed about inmates. That many of them there are evil people that are there, but there are many people that have made one horrific mistake in their life, and we can be judgmental, but we've all made one or two or several horrific mistakes in our life, and many of us deserve to be right where those guys are. So it's hard to be judgmental.
Yeah, that's a good word. Who else? What were your preconceived notions? What were your thoughts?
So I've been a volunteer inside a prison for most recently the last 3 years, and so I personally have met the change that we're reading about, and so I wasn't surprised when I read the book and the stories.
I will say that prior to reading the book, I didn't really, it's something that I hadn't even really thought about in some respects, and it's kind of odd for me to say that, especially because of what I do for a living. I don't delve into criminal, but I definitely, to the point made earlier, as someone who went to a really big university and, graduated and all that, I had a lot of fun during college. And I think about some of those things and decisions that I made, and it could have definitely been different. For me, it really doesn't take that much for you to end up in a place that you never thought you would be. And I think that that's something that really kind of grabbed me with the book and just with this topic, this subject in general. My first I guess introduction to like jail or prison was through like a mentoring program I was in, and they took us kind of just on a tour, but something had happened in the prison that day, and so um, we weren't even able to tour, and so we were rushed out of the waiting area, and it was actually kind of scary. This happened when I was like I think 13 or 14, and since then I never really gave it much thought. I was just like, oh, jail, prison, it's a scary place, no place for kids. Um, and honestly, even, uh, like I said, through college, law school, all of different things, I never really thought about the people in prison, like the people themselves. Like we're all people and we come from different walks of life and backgrounds, but and they have stories, and those stories need to be told and understood and not just heaped together in a way that does not allow for their humanity.
This is the one question I want to be sure I hear from everybody on. So there are 3 of you left, and I'll let you choose yourself, or I can choose you, but I think Sally's going to go next.
I would say that having worked in other ministries, specifically the homeless ministry, I wasn't surprised by what I read in the book from the standpoint of what got people there. It goes back to what Ken was saying, is it can be just one choice. And when I read the book, I could put my name on some of those pages, and probably all of us could. And we just put our name in there and imagine that I could have made that mistake, and I could have lived that life and experienced that. So I wasn't surprised by what I read. I will save my comments for the impact that it had on me, though, for later.
Great. Shane and Lynn, down to the two of you.
I can go. Rest of you, I wasn't really surprised by the book. I guess I have a little bit of an in to Jumpstart in that Tommy is on the board, and I hear a lot of things and a lot of the things that go on there and a lot of the people. But a year or so ago, I attended a luncheon with Tommy, and I specifically remember a female, Sally Yvonne, standing up to tell her story. If I had met her on the street, she could have been my best friend. I mean, she looked normal. I don't know what I think a prisoner is supposed to look like, but her story was incredible. And again, she had made a mistake and had been away from her family, her husband, her children, whatnot. And her story was that she's back out in the world now, and she didn't know where. She basically had to start over. It was like a new birth. She needed to get a checkbook. She needed to, just things that we take for granted every day, and all the things that she talked about that she needed to do and could do. So that impacted me. But I guess something I realized even before getting involved with Jumpstart, and as Ken and you've all alluded to, we made mistakes, but something, no matter how, what is the ultimate sin? Sin is sin. And I don't know about the ultimate sin, and what we have to realize, what horror or horrible one thing these people have done. Every person on this earth has a soul, and it's the soul that matters. And sometimes I look at young girls and things that they've done, and I think, she's somebody's daughter. And just
Yeah, I think similar experience to Ken, or not experience, a similar thought process. In that just some of the experiences I had, whether growing up with friends who might have ended up incarcerated, or an experience where my grandparents took me into their prison ministry down in the Wateree prison near Camden, South Carolina. And some of those men in there when I was 21, I think, and I had just become a Christian myself. And so just thinking there's not much difference between me and them, save that they got caught, right? And then some of the young men, I had a little bit of kind of like Sally was saying, a kind of a cross section of background in ministry and some different vocations. And one of them took me to a city called East St. Louis, Illinois, and did some work there in kind of an inner city type community for a while. And one of the guys that was a part of our some of our programs and that I coached in football, he got really mad at his girlfriend for cheating on him and killed her and the guy. And and thinking about Amos, and it's like that was just a moment of rage and a poor decision. And I've had moments of, I know the kid, and that's not, he was not one you'd think is going to sit around and plan to do something, and so you think about these times in my life where I've acted in a moment of anger, and it's just not resulted in something like that. And so I don't say all that to say that we lack ownership of our actions, but just to say that I guess that's kind of part of my view, is that there's not a lot of difference between me and a lot of those men and women that find themselves incarcerated, other than either my sins or crimes, whatever, how we want to lump that together, didn't result in, didn't elevate to a convicted level, or just didn't get caught, and
I think a couple of themes that one can pick up on just listening to what our panel is sharing is we all come at this from a position of a relative degree of awareness or a lack of awareness. And that's certainly part of my own story. Years ago, I would have said, I'm afraid of incarcerated people. I would rather stay away from it. It's out of sight, out of mind anyway. I'd rather not know about it. That was the old me. But our system also is built to some degree and designed to keep incarcerated folks out of sight, out of mind. And that's part of the challenge that many of us have to work to overcome if we ever overcome it. So starting from those prior notions, what you just shared, what were your, and thinking about the people in the book specifically, not necessarily naming anybody or using anybody as an example, but starting from your prior notions of similar folks to what you read about in the book, did any of your thinking change? Did it spark any new information for you?
I couldn't wait to read the next story and the next story and the next story. It wasn't one of those things where I would just read one. I mean, I read the whole thing straight through. And it just, so I don't know that my thinking changed as much as maybe my compassion changed, because they are real people.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sally. Yes, sir, Richard.
Yeah, I was going to tell you how I found out about JUMPSTART. I really had never heard of it, even though apparently Lynn and Tom had been involved for a while. But Joyce and I were over at Lynn's house taking care of our great grand dog. And he started barking, ran up to the gate at the fence. And I went up and there was a truck in the yard. And I didn't know who it was. But eventually a young man that I later found out was Carrie Sanders came over and he just spoke, said, I left some books for Tommy at the door. So I went to the door, got the books, and Sally, pretty much like you, I picked the book up and I didn't put it down until I had read every story. I had no clue who Carrie Sanders was, although I just seen him, until I saw his picture at the end of the book. So I think it changed my mind a good bit, because first of all, I learned about a program that I did not know existed. I read about people that the program had helped, and I actually saw Carrie Sanders, and he seemed like a nice young man just from a distance. So my impression changed a great deal about people who are in prison and who are in JUMPSTART and who have found Jesus Christ while in prison. Up until then, I think my attitude had been that they just said that to make life easier for them, and I believe otherwise.
Thank you, Richard.
Oh, one of the things that I will say is I liked seeing the pictures. I know that seems like such a small thing, but to Sally's point and to Richard's point, and really something that Lynn also said earlier, the human element. You're looking at the story, but you're seeing that person's face. And I think that there's something about, especially in the era of COVID, right? That human connection, making things real, making things about people, not titles, not regions, not political affiliations, not religious affiliations. It's just a person with a heart and a soul. And so I enjoyed reading the name and the story, but also seeing the picture, and seeing what that person had to go to have the smile that they have on their face. I thought was really, really just powerful for me.
I'm so glad she said that, Yvonne. Thank you for saying that, because that really resonated with me as well, seeing the picture and connecting the story with the person. And for me, it was about the smile. Not all of them, but most of them are smiling. And that was very powerful to me.
Carrie was probably one of the first people that I met when we got involved in JUMPSTART. And I just had a good time with Carrie. I love young people, and I had spent an hour or two with him, had lunch with him as Carrie. As Carrie, that's all I do. And I told Tommy afterwards what a great young man he was, and just how, and Tommy said, you realize that he was incarcerated and this is what he did. And Carrie is, he tells some of his story, really doesn't tell all of his story, but the last page of the book is Carrie Sanders, and that's who Daddy was referring to. So Carrie had been in prison for quite some time, and armed robbery and attempted murder. But again, my thinking, I thought, I would, if Tommy had said to me beforehand, okay, you're going to meet somebody who's been in prison now, I would have gone in there with a different attitude, I'm sure, than the one that I went in with. And Carrie is one of my favorites. I mean, I love that young man, and he's now married and has a child. And I just, it changes the way that I look at some of these people. They're real people.
Well, I thought it was refreshing. Maybe Yvonne referred to kind of the COVID season, and that for a lot of us has probably meant church online. And so it's that's been tougher spiritually, just without some of that community, right? And so just reading the men consistently talking about the power of Christ transforming their lives, for me, was just personally really refreshing and encouraging. And that's kind of a little side anecdote, but that's what came out of the book for me.
Piggybacking on what Yvonne and Shane have said, and the thing that and you mentioned it, Tommy, it's so easy because the system does put everybody away so that we can forget them. They're out of sight, they're out of mind. But when you think about what we've gone through this last year, I think it's only worse for someone that's incarcerated. And that book helped to remind me that those guys that I met when I was in Angola, they're still there. 88% of the prisoners in Angola died there. So I've not been there in years, but they're still there. That's their life every day. These guys. So this book reminded me of that what we're experiencing with COVID, we can still go to Walmart, we can still do a lot of the things. I mean, their life has changed because I don't think they get guests. They don't have any visitors. So life's even what little bit of joy, well, maybe not joy, but what little spark that they would have is probably not there anymore in that way, the visitors coming in. So that just reminded me of that. It was a good reminder.
I'm in touch with Perry prison down in Greenville, and these guys, for the most part, are in lockdown, and which is a very difficult life. They are not able to go out much at all with COVID. I can't even imagine it personally. But the book, for me, I deal with a lot of lives on the inside. I've made a lot of friends, and I tell guys on the inside that I love them more than I truly love them, and they truly love me. That's something I can't say to some of the people in my family. So it's incredible what is going on in there, what Christ is doing in there. But so I deal mostly on the inside. What was great about the book for me was to see, with the help of JUMPSTART, what, as a conduit, what the possibilities are for these men when they are released or out on parole.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. So did you find the book easy to read, or was it difficult in some way?
I found the book really easy to read. The stories were impactful, but they were pretty short. Like I said before, I really enjoyed seeing the pictures of the people to just give that human face to the struggle that they had gone through. And I also, I know that this book this is clearly a Christian-based or a Bible-based initiative, but I actually thought to myself, this book could be given to anyone, anywhere. There is the thread of Christ running through the book, obviously, but I thought to myself, this book could be given out very widely to illustrate a number of things. And so I found the book easy to read and great to read, and I've read it from cover to cover really quickly.
It was very easy to read and very, I mean, I knew what we were reading about, and I knew each time I turned the page, I'd be reading about, people who really have had a tough life. Still, I looked forward to reading what I was going to read because of what Christ has done in their lives. Very easy reading for me.
I tell you what it made me do. It made me want to sit down and get to know each one of them a little more.
I'll just piggyback right on that. I thought the same thing, and not to sound as a critique or criticism, but I thought, man, I almost wish it was like half as many guys or girls and twice as long a page. 2 pages for everyone, kind of thing. Not to discount anything that it is, but just that same thing kind of left me wanting to just hear a little more about each one, or the whole thing could have been twice as long. But that's but I understand the purpose. It was still very helpful and good. That's not a criticism. That's just wanted more.
And in all fairness to our panel, the book was not designed for this purpose that we're doing right here. It was designed specifically to go directly to people who are currently incarcerated, and to be frankly just a beacon of light and hope for them to grab onto, that would be, and I think I even did this with a few of you. I showed you a big thick book and said, I want you to read this big thick book. And then I said, no, what I really want you to do is I want you to read this. And that, this little thing right here was just designed to be something that if you were incarcerated, then you might find on one or more of these pages some reason perhaps to think a little bit differently. It wasn't designed to be all things. I actually personally, and I'm not trying to sound like I'm doing an advertisement, I'm not. I actually think the book has turned out to be much more than it was ever actually designed for already. It's certainly there could be a lot more, and I too would like to know more about some of these folks, although I know quite a few of them already. So easy or difficult? Anybody else? Any other thoughts on that?
Hey, Tommy, can I add to something you just said? It's really helpful to know the purpose and the intent behind the book, and I think that is I think the way it's written and having the stories of the people who have been incarcerated, I think that's important. I could write a book and it would have no meaning to the people in prison because I haven't walked in their shoes. I haven't experienced that, but the people in this book have. And to me, I mean, I'm hoping that people who are incarcerated will connect with what's written in this book by people who can relate to their situation.
Thank you, Sally.
And if I could just add to something that Shane said a second ago, I was kind of thinking, about the part 2, because the stories are short enough that they grab you. But to Shane's point, I would have loved them to go in depth a bit more, or whether that's half the people and twice the information, or a part 1, a part 2, a part 3. I think the way the stories are presented is great for the purpose, but I would have loved a deeper dive as well.
One thing that has happened with me, if I could just share real quickly, is we all find different people we get interested in. We want to know more about them. Maybe we're a student of history, or we're a student of civil rights, or we're a student of economics, or we're a student of faith or religion, whatever we turn out to be students of. But I've actually found myself over the last few decades becoming a student of less fortunate people. And I don't mean to make light of that at all. It's just that honestly, homeless people in some respects fascinate me in a way I never would have realized. And incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people, I find myself wanting to know a lot more about these kinds of folks in this kind of a journey than people I might see on the covers of various magazines at the checkout counter, if you know what I'm saying. And I'm not trying to make it more than it is. It's just that when you think about somebody like a Philip Robinson on page 22, Philip, by the time he found the Lord, he was dying. He was imminently in the presence of death. Now, he didn't know it yet, but he was there. And he found the Lord, and through JUMPSTART, and he became a model poster child, if you will, for JUMPSTART's process. And he left prison and was almost immediately diagnosed with the death that he was in the presence of. And then he died just almost moments later, just a matter of days, a few weeks later. But this you've talked about seeing somebody's face. To see this gentleman on video and watch him tell his story, it's strong enough to read it, but to watch him tell his story, you look and you try to put yourself in his shoes and say, okay, I've been incarcerated for 45 years. I'm dying. I find Jesus. I get out. I find out I'm dying, and then I die. Okay. That's probably not a recipe most of us would set up to say that's the most joyful thing that's going to bring joy to my face and my life I can imagine. In fact, most of us are going to be bitter. I probably honestly would be bitter. And this man was just boiling over with excitement and joy and happy. And that's not something people can do for person. We can take them to a place perhaps where they can get access to that. In that respect, there are parts of this book that are difficult to read from my point of view, but not because the read itself is difficult, but these stories, like we've just said, these are real people. They are real people. Anybody else? Easy or difficult? Anything else on that?
Well, if I could add to that, I said it was an easy read, and it was an easy read, and I looked forward to every page. But I guess there was one thing that was difficult about it, and that was just feeling the pain, I guess, that I imagined the pain that they must have felt, the things that they had missed out on in life. And so from that standpoint, it was not an easy read, but I just thought I'd add that.
Absolutely, Sally. Thank you. Ken said something earlier that brings pain to my mind, and that's the word Walmart. And if I go to Walmart, and there are those on this call who can attest to how infrequently I go and how reluctantly I ever do it. If the line is 3 people deep, I'm in pain. I'm just in pain. And there are folks in this book who spent decades with tomorrow being exactly like today. Decades. And yes, the pain of that is I really think in many respects it is unbearable alone. And I think that's part of what this story is, that you might be able to stay physically alive through it, but to get some sort of life, some sort of quality into your life, some sort of joy into your life, being alone, you don't get there. There's a lot of pain in these stories. So if we agree that incarcerated folks, formerly incarcerated folks, or folks who are going from one state to the other state to another condition, if these folks are important in our society, if they're real people, if they have souls like everybody else, then what can we do? What can we do as people? What can we do about it?
I know a few people in the panel have talked about how they volunteer in prisons and jails and various prison ministries. And I think that that is one amazing way that you start to reach people. Um, and I think one of the things to do also is to continue to educate people, just like some of our opinions have changed or been more informed by reading the book, by knowing people who are involved with this particular ministry. I think education is definitely one of the things that needs to continue, just to bring the humanity of those who are incarcerated to the forefront and know that they are, um, worth knowing, worth learning about, and even worth saving. But one of the things that hit me is, I had a really good childhood full of love, great friends, great parents, other parents that took me in and probably claimed me on their taxes a couple of years, and I'm not mad. I just want to say I'm not mad. Um, but you know, as I was reading some of the stories, what grabbed me was the fact that their trouble started so early, like in their childhood, whether it was crime or abusive families or poverty or all of the things that never touched me personally, and honestly didn't touch my friends and really their families either. And so you know that is something that I kind of have been meditating and reflecting on. And so that's why, to bring me back to something that I said about what can we continue to do, I think it's education, and I think it's awareness, because I, as much as I hate to say it, I mean, we all have our struggles in life, of varying degrees, but um, I haven't had some of the struggles, especially in my younger years, that these people did. And I think that it really is a topic of conversation and education. It's like we really need to be reaching out to everyone, but especially troubled youth, I think, because that one decision is what can make the difference.
If you examine the people currently inside the system doesn't necessarily mean uh, inside the prison walls. There are 19,000 or so juveniles and adults incarcerated. Inside the system includes parolees and others. Uh, and you examine the circumstances that existed prior to their conviction and their incarceration, you find a number of patterns that most of us, when we observe these patterns, I think we look at it and say, well, I guess I sort of thought that was true, but uh, they tend to line up pretty clearly along a pretty distinct socioeconomic status and situation. There's usually a struggle, a suffering. There's a disproportionate representation of minorities who are incarcerated or are inside the system. And that is not at all because a disproportionate number of minorities are predisposed to crime. It is a function of what occurs much earlier in life that creates the environment and the conditions by which the probability of being convicted of a crime are greater. And this is not to dodge the responsibility of the individual. But none of us who support, to the best of my knowledge, none of us who support the good work of this kind of ministry believes there should not be consequences for behaviors. That there certainly should be. But you have to get before the behaviors, to Yvonne's point. You have to go look at, not dealing with incarcerated folks is a wonderful thing, but it is not enough. What are causing people to become convicted and to go to prison and be incarcerated, and therefore have to one day be post-incarcerated? So that is a much larger context issue. It is the fundamental issue, and that'll be a subject we'll also delve into perhaps on a future session similar to this. Ken?
I think what an awful lot of it boils down to is just a lack of fatherlessness, a lack of a father figure in the home. um, whether it's white or black, whether it's Hispanic. I think that so many absent fathers causes a crying out almost of teenagers looking for the attention, and it just escalates to the point to where eventually there are crimes that are made, crimes that are committed, and well, that's one thing I did talk to an awful lot of guys when I have done prison ministry, and I've just asked them, tell me about your dad, and almost every single one of them I've talked with would tell you they either weren't present or the relationship was so horrible that well, the influence, if any at all, was a bad one, you know. And so I just it reminds me of the story about and it's a true story about the guy that was a construction worker and got sent to prison and built when they found out he was a foreman with a construction company. They asked him to build part of the prison, and he did. And many years later, his son was sent there. And one of the things that came out of that story was he kind of built a prison in two ways. His dad did, by being absent, but literally physically building the prison there. So he really did it in two ways to his son.
I would echo what Yvonne and Ken have said about something that we can do about it. I believe we all are looking for a sense of belonging. And so whatever we do, to me, has to get to the root of a sense of belonging, of that a person matters, that their life matters. I probably will go back and do this now, but as I read the book, the one word that just kept jumping out these pages at me, but it's a word that I love anyway, so it's not surprising. It's the word purpose. And in so many of these stories, people talked about purpose. They found their purpose. And we all must have a purpose, a reason for living. So I think whatever we do, and I do believe it needs to be done very early on, and it's systemic in the family unit, as Ken was talking about, it has to be connected to a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose.
So many and you ask a great question, Tom, what do we do? With what I'm saying is what I feel like one of the problems being the lack of the father figure in the home, that failure there. So what's the answer? And here's, you look at society right now, a lot of well, for me, when my dad was absent, when I was a young teenager and 8, 9, 10 years old, he was an alcoholic and he was gone. And when he was home, he was abusive. So, but I was a member of Boy Scouts, and Boy Scouts were phenomenal to me. There was something there. But look how even the Boy Scouts are under attack. It's. I don't think I would put my son in a Boy Scout troop anymore. But so but a lot of those things that would help to supply a male figure, a positive male role, just don't seem to be so present anymore. I don't know, but anyway. So to answer your question, what can we do? I'm kind of challenged in this little bit of time to go, how can I find a young man that I could be a positive role model for, and to pour my life into so that it makes a difference in their life, and maybe especially one that doesn't have that father figure, maybe I could help in that way.
Well, and if I could add to that, Ken, I think it leaves without the father figure in the home, it leaves the mother trying to do so much. And I think a lot of times, even in the best of situations, the mother is not equipped with the parenting skills that are needed to raise children. They don't know how to raise children in a loving environment, whether the father is there or not. But then you take the father out of it, and they're trying to provide food for the family and clothing, and it's hard, I think, for them to provide the love and the sense of belonging that the
And
child needs.
and when the father's absent and the mother then typically has to go to work, which mine did, what it does is it usually leaves that child coming home from school without anyone to be there. And you know where that leads. Typically there's that element of the wrong friends, the wrong people that they're hanging around. And it becomes a slippery slope. That's my take on it.
So Jumpstart's purpose as a ministry is to, in not so many words, break the back of recidivism, meaning people coming out of prison and returning. What we're touching on here is the thing we really need to break the back of, is we have to stop people from going to prison, not because they don't go because they rightfully deserve to, but that they don't deserve to. They don't rightfully have gotten themselves into a situation where under the law they should be incarcerated. This is part of the weight of the challenge that's before us. And I'm gonna shift the question a little bit. It was a bit of a, and I warned you that I might toss something in on you at this point. I really ask you the hardest of all questions, like what can we do about it? And it, honestly, that's a tough question. You've read the book. Some of you have served for decades in parallel ministries, or even directly for a long time in this kind of ministry. But to ask you, or to ask us, what do we do about this, is tough. We don't know the answers. But I think maybe we can at least test ourselves. We can ask ourselves about our resolve. And maybe the better question, or the first better question, is, do you believe something can be done about it? Do you believe that? You don't have, you can just vote. Do you believe something can be done about this? And if so, if you believe something can be done about it, do you think it has to involve everybody? Meaning, is this something that can the government just do it, or can a church just do it, or is this a societal? Is it really a societal problem to fix this? I think it is. The question I think that is perhaps one that we can move toward closing on is to think about each of us is on our individual journeys. Each of us has different points of view. Each of us comes from kind of a different background on this subject. But do you personally, not just from having read the book, but just from this subject matter, from the subject matter of people who are in prison, and I'm not attempting to quote biblical scripture or anything like that, but do you view this as a personal responsibility? Do you think of it as a personal responsibility to try to be part of the solution?
I will say something. Probably prior to reading this book, I'll be honest and say I don't necessarily think that I would have used the words personal responsibility to describe anything around incarcerated people, or, you know, things related to that. I definitely had awareness of the problem, which we all do because we are all probably well read. We watch the news. We, uh, you know, talk to different people. I mean, we've all heard phrases and words like school to prison pipeline, and to what our wonderful moderator said earlier about. I mean, we know that it's a problem. Everyone knows that it's a problem, and I think that now after reading the book, I think, and then obviously the knowledge that I had before, I do think that we do have a responsibility as Christians, as citizens, as um, uh, we do have a responsibility, and if we don't do anything, the problem's not going to go away. Um, so I definitely would say that for me personally, I'm not speaking for anyone else, but I definitely see this as something that I I would want to have some involvement in. And I think that it is going to take all of us. It's not a government problem. It's not just a church problem. It's not, um, you know, I mean, it's not necessarily an academic or a school problem. It is incumbent upon all people, all industries, all realms to do what they can.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be a very tough one to follow. However, I would love for each of you to comment on that. Do you feel it? And it's okay if you don't. I'm really after the honest truth here. Do you feel a personal responsibility about this subject?
I agree with everything Yvonne said. It makes me want to get involved. What can I personally do? I don't know. Would I honestly, and I've toyed the thought about, before COVID, actually going into the prison because there are volunteers needed in the prison. I thought, well, I'd be protected in there and somebody would watch me if I went in there and if I led a Bible study or if I had a women's Bible study or whatnot. So I know there are things that we can do. I think right now, because of COVID, I guess, I don't know what the personal thing to do is other than what we are doing. And as Yvonne said, I too believe it starts in the home. It makes me want to. I think about all these little children that have not been able to go to school because of COVID. And honestly, they would be better off in school with COVID, in spite of COVID, than in some of the home situations that they've been in. And, we have no idea what some of these children go through. School was their safe zone. School was safety to them.
Right.
So along those lines, I can look and think, yeah, maybe I could get personally involved and do something. Can I go in the prison? And, no. And do I really want to do that right now? No, not on the inside. But I think there's lots of work to be done.
The problem is one of prevention. Keep the people from going there in the first place. And I don't mean to get political with this comment, but there's been a lot of talk recently about reducing police force and increasing. The other side of that is to do the preventive programs. And I guess my view is that you need both, and we need to spend a lot more time and effort on whatever it takes to prevent the people from reaching prison in the first place. As far as me personally, at this stage of my life, I don't know that there's a whole lot I can do, maybe contribute to the program or something, but that's kind of the extent for me. But I can see where there's a need for a lot of people to do a lot of work in the prevention area.
Well, Lynn was talking, something occurred to me. There's something very simple we can all do because we're all prayerful people and Christians, is pray for these folks that are on the inside or who don't have this story yet, who are just beginning to make that decision to follow Christ or get involved with JUMPSTART program.
I've been sitting here listening and wondering how I'd respond to that. And I don't know that I feel an intense personal responsibility to take some specific action. Do I believe that it's a systemic problem and that it's going to take everybody to deal with it? Yes, I do. What my role in that is, I have no clue, no possible idea. But I would like to also add that, we spent a good bit of time talking about that it's a systemic problem and we need to prevent people from going there. But I do believe that we need to make sure that when people leave prison, they don't end up there again. And I I can't imagine what it is like being incarcerated, being isolated, being cut off from community and relationships, and then suddenly being thrust into this world. This world changes so rapidly. I mean, look at all the changes that we've all experienced just this year in 2020. Imagine that you've been incarcerated for 20 years, however many years, and then you're thrust into it. I believe that's a big problem, and people are fortunate enough to be released. We don't want them to end up there again.
You're spot on. Folks who come out of an incarcerated, especially one of any extended period of time, have become so routinized and maintained and sustained by the system. And this is not said in a demeaning way. They don't know how to do anything. They don't know where to get health care. They don't know how to get a driver's license. They don't know how to train to get a driver's license. They don't know where to go to get a social security number. They don't know how or where or what to do anything. Even their access to online resources has been severely limited, which it should be, but they're not able to just Google the answers to all these questions. I mean, it's a very, very difficult transition to leave total dependence on the state and to try to enter independent American life. I mean, it's a overwhelming challenge for many. To your point, obviously I don't want to belittle it in any way, but we have to take a starfish mentality that every starfish we can get back in the ocean, meaning it doesn't die on the beach through recidivism, is a win. Every one of those is a win. But eventually, we hope someday, we're able to perhaps keep some of those starfish from washing up on the beach as well. Ken, what do you think? Do you feel a personal responsibility?
Absolutely. That's why I said, when I think of how can I make a difference, I think, to find some way that they're young men that you can play a part in their life, especially those that have the father absent. And as I'm sitting here listening to what you and Sally are saying about, and I recall, putting in the radio station at Angola, and literally, there was an inmate run radio station. So they let us computerize everything. They took out the communication parts of the computer where you couldn't Google or whatever, no internet. But I'm teaching these 5 guys that are inmates how to run the music with a computer. And I said, any questions? And I remember one of the guys named Prentice said, Mr. Ken, what is that? And I'm holding a mouse in my hand and I'm going, oh my goodness. And I looked at my engineer and said, put some of the old equipment back in. This is going to be a lot harder. So the personal responsibility for men and women that are coming out of the prison, somehow or another, maybe we can befriend them. Somehow or another, maybe we can be a part of that transition from where they were. Because, and I think you called it something else, but there is a word for it called institutionalized. And I remember asking a guy who had been in prison 45 years, what are you going to do when you get out? And he shuddered. He was like, I don't want to get out. That was his normal, and it scared him. But maybe we, on that side of it, we can be a part of the prevention over here, but on the other side of it, we can be a part of the transition to where it doesn't make it easy, but it will make it easier to help them move from being incarcerated to life outside the walls.
Right. Folks, we are approaching the end of our time together. That was a bit of a loaded question, and I think it's all of our nature sometimes when we're asked something like that to want to convert it to what we're going to do. We feel it, but then and the truth is, I really think it's as simple as we need more people to feel it. We need more people to be more aware. Each of you obviously feels a personal responsibility for this at some level because you agreed to read the book. And I know I played games with some of you and said it was a great big book, and I showed you how thin it was, and you were willing to do it because the book was thin. But you read the book, and I asked you then to come and do this, and you were willing to do it. And you were willing to do it in the hands of an amateur, such as myself. And you were willing to do it with a group of people that you don't really know. Not all of you know all of you. And this is a subject that is it's heavy, it's complex, it's really got a lot of moving parts to it, and you were felt enough responsibility that you were open and honest, and you shared willingly, and for that I thank you very much. So we are going to wrap it up. We're at the end of our time. I had thought we might have a little time here just for a few closing comments from everybody, but I think we'll just go ahead and wind it up. I do want to thank all of you again. I appreciate it very much. I'm going to email and send some more information to you. This is not a hook you in and get you to do anything. It's just to try to help you have more information. And if I could ask one thing of you is if you get an opportunity and this subject comes up in your presence, just be willing to share openly with people and tell them what you think. And the more people who talk a little more openly about it, the better we're all going to be in terms of our understanding of what we might be able to do about it. So thanks again, and everyone have a good night, and we will talk to everyone soon. Take care.